Good evening, everyone. We are going ahead and get started. Okay, we're all set. My name is Angela Waller. I am the Director of External Affairs for the Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle's office, and we are so excited to have you here this evening. We are being hosted by our wonderful Commissioner of the 6th District, Donna Miller, and she's coming to the stage. Okay, so at this time, I am going to invite, are you going to stay from there? You going to go? Are you mic'd? No, this one, we had some technical difficulties. And we'll have greetings from Commissioner Miller.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Angela, for that introduction. It's great to see everyone here tonight in the village of Lynwood, where I also live. So that's also happy to be with here. And our mayor is here, and I know she has to leave out in just a few minutes. So I just wanted to thank the mayor and all of her staff. If she wants to just come up and just say a couple of words to greetings before she has to step away before she comes back. You want to just come up, Mayor Curry? I guess this doesn't pull out. Okay.
I'll just project. How about that? Actually, there you go, right? Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to see all of your faces. I'm excited to have our county partners here. I love when our resources come to the village of Lynwood and we don't have to go out because it makes it a lot easier, obviously, for those of you with little people like the little lady up front to participate and be engaged. So I hope that you take great notes. I hope that you ask lots of questions. I want to acknowledge Trustee Rolanda Clark, who is here with me, and I believe some other trustees will be joining us shortly, and I look forward to seeing you all at the end.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, thank you all, and I just wanted to thank our Cook County Department of the President's Office, Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle, and her team who is here tonight for putting this together. And this is, like I said, we're in the 6th District. I hope everybody knows that this is the 6th District as well as home to all of us. But I'm honored to stand here with my colleagues on the board to participate. This is Cook County's 5th annual Racial Equity Week. And it was a couple of weeks ago, and the focus of it is to draw attention to and address and improve inequities that still exist in our government, our workplaces, and society. The Equity Fund, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a little while, and the investments that are made from the county are guided by our policy roadmap and the Equity Task Fund Force. It's an example of us work of just not talking the talk, but actually walking the walk and doing the work by investing in programs and initiatives that create greater equity throughout the county. $70 million will be invested this year and will continue on to next year to create safe, healthy, and thriving communities in Cook County by transforming systems around justice, including environmental justice, which we'll hear about more, public safety, health, housing, economic opportunity, community development, and social services. All of these things are important to everyone in Cook County. And anyone who's ever heard me talk before, that we always say Cook County has 130 municipalities. So whenever the focus is always on Chicago, Chicago is one of those. The rest of us live in those other 130. And Cook County is also very diverse. It has a racial makeup of about 42% white, 24% black, 25% Hispanic or Latino, 8% Asian, and 2% other. And I'm proud to say that I represent a district that really has one of the most diverse racial makeups in the county. And that we can draw a lot of strength from that diversity in focusing our investments and policies through the equity lens that we'll hear more about, and to enhance that strength and help ensure all of our residents have the chance to reach their full potential. I'm not going to go into all the different focuses because I'm sure that will be talked about, but we have transportation and transit equity that we'll talk about, digital equity, violence prevention, and all of these things will help increase all of the services that go along in Cook County. In total, we've had over $85 million in being invested over the next couple of years to positively impact communities in the need to combat the roots of the violence and all the other economic injustices that we see across all of Cook County. So we're going to get into this really thought-provoking conversation. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to thank my team, Jeremy Young, who helped work with the mayor's office to put this together. I also want to give a special shout out to my volunteers who are here tonight because they are young people from the community and they are here helping us. So young ladies, thank you so much for coming out. And this is what community is all about. I mean, even though we talk about diversity and community, most communities care about the same thing. They want safe neighborhoods. They want a place for their kids to be able to grow up in. They want to be able to go outside. I've been fortunate enough to live in Lynwood for the last almost 19 years. And I've always felt safe in Lynwood. I've always been able to put my kids outside on their bikes when even the lights were not on, if it was dark out and kids were in the community. And these are things that I think all communities in the Southland have in common. So I'd like to kick it back over to Angela, who's going to introduce our great panel of speakers who are here tonight, and they're not strangers to Lynwood. I know that all of them have been here before.
Yes, we have.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. And again, I just wanted to say thank you to Mayor Curry and to her executive assistant, Bianca, for helping us bring this together with the county, and definitely Jeremy from the Commissioner's office. And as Commissioner stated, this is part of our Racial Equity Week that we hosted last week, and these town halls this is the first one of a series of 3 where we will continue to have the discussion about equity in the county and the work that's being done. And what I'm going to do now is actually play a video to kind of level set, to get your mind in the frame of what we're going to be discussing tonight. We have 3 areas that we will focus on, but there are actually 25 recommendations that the Equity Fund Task Force presented to the Cook County Board President. And those recommendations are actually on the back on those easels, so we definitely want you to take a look at the work that's being done across the county. So right now I'm going to go ahead and play the video.
Equity. It's different from equality. Equality, of course, is treating everyone the same, as if we all come from the same place and need the same things. Equity is different. It reminds us that there is no one size that fits all, no one solution for every problem. People who have been overlooked for a long time need more attention. We all know there's a problem. But the question is, what can we do about it? In Cook County, we're taking bold, sweeping action to address endless cycles of racist policies and historic inequities. We created the Cook County Equity Fund because we believe government has the responsibility to make sure we all, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation, share equally in our civil and human rights. The right to live safely, the right to good health, the right to a clean environment, the right to economic vitality, the right to leaders we can trust. The Cook County Equity Fund is undoing decades of disinvestment that made life difficult for generations of people pushed to the margins of our society. Our commitment to you is total. But reversing systems of injustice centuries in the making is a tremendous undertaking. Succeeding requires partnerships with organizations both public and private. This historic fund is unique in the world of government.
There are many reasons we're the first to create something like the Equity Fund. It's very hard work, but it must be done, and the time to do it is now. History will remember us not for our caution, but for our courage to act when it mattered most.
And so now I'm going to introduce Lynetta Haynes Turner. She is the Chief of Staff to the Cook County Board President and the fearless leader behind all of this work with the Equity Fund Task Force. This has been her baby, her labor of love, and she's going to give us an overview of exactly what the Equity Fund is.
All right, thank you, Angela, and good evening, everybody. All right, so you saw a little bit of the video. First, Lynetta Haynes Turner. I have been at the county for 9 years, 5 years as the Chief of Staff, and we have made a very concerted effort over the President's administration really to focus on equity, specifically racial equity. So back in 2018, we put together our policy roadmap, which is really our strategic plan. Let's think about it that way. County is vast. Under offices under the President, there are 35 departments and 6 bureaus and over 2,200 employees just for the President's office. That doesn't include the separately elected offices like the Sheriff's Office and the Chief Judge's Office and our property tax stakeholders. So in 2018, when we created the roadmap, it really was all of this great work that we're doing. How do we make sure that we are creating the vision that government has or should have about investing in people? And so in that, we really doubled down on the commitment around equity, excellence, and engagement. Fast forward, doing that work, and we knew for the racial equity, it was important for the President and I. And it's not just us, right? We have Sis who will introduce herself. It's all of our teams, because you can't get to equity and racial equity if not everybody is on board with that. What we wanted to make sure was not only were we thinking internally about what does equity look like for all of our residents. Commissioner Miller gave those statistics. The county is broad and diverse, right? And oftentimes government does not think about those people and residents who don't have. It's typically those that do. And so that intentionality is really where the Equity Fund came. November of 2020 is when it was established, but if you guys recall, we were just coming out of the immediate response to COVID. People had been shut in, not your whole life, all of our lives turned upside down. That summer of 2020 was a lot of civil unrest. The George Floyd happened where he was murdered. And so all of that was, what else can government do? What's our moral responsibility? But what is also our operational responsibility to be good fiduciary stewards, but also to really think about how do we make all of the access to our resources more equitable. And so in November of 2020, we said, let's start the Equity Fund. Let's not just talk about it, and let's actually put real dollars behind just the day-to-day work, but also in eliminating systems. We all know, many of us, the decades-long disinvestments that have occurred, South, Southwest side, South suburban area. And so the Equity Fund says it's not just about investing in programs and services, but this also provides us an opportunity to really think more broadly about all of the systems that impact particularly Black and brown people, right? So if you're looking at the criminal legal system and those disparate impacts, if you're looking at the property tax, I know you guys, of course, in the South suburban areas are overburdened by, for those who own their homes. How do we start not just to talk about it, but how do we start to actually change those systems, whether it's policy changes, whether it's going down to Springfield to advocate for legislative changes, and of course then investing real dollars. That's really what the Equity Fund is about. Across those 25 recommendations, whether it's looking at safe neighborhoods, looking at improving environmental issues. The flood just happened, again, South Suburbs, Cicero, the west side of Chicago got the brunt of that. And so environment, and then of course Sis is going to talk about transportation and all of the equity work there, and then Rodney will talk about digital equity. But that was really kind of the impetus for the Equity Fund. So November 2020, we created the fund. By the following year, May of 2021, we had like 85 very dedicated task force members from a lot of different community organizations, community members themselves, and we spent the better part of over a year on Zoom twice a month during the pandemic, coming up with the Equity Fund recommendations that you see displayed in the back. That's the commitment that not only Cook County government had, but commissioners and their staff and many of our partners. And they held us accountable, right? How are you going to reinvest these dollars? How are you going to help to change systems? And who are the other partners that you're going to work with? So the fund itself, every year we are committed to putting corporate dollars, like the county dollars, into it. And we have the task force that is an advisory body. They meet with us quarterly. And we have our team, many of our members of our employees from our bureaus and departments are working every day, not just on the day-to-day operations, but thinking about it in an equity lens. If I boil down to what is it, it's about improving outcomes for everyone through equity and not just equality. And I probably talked way too long. I think that was supposed to be just an introduction. But Angela did cut me off, and you all didn't say nothing, so I just kept talking. Sorry.
Absolutely. We needed that. It was an overview.
It was an overview, right.
Yeah, so now we're going to introduce our other two panelists. Lynetta is joined by Jennifer Killen, who likes to go by Sis, and Mr. Rodney Harrington. As Lynetta mentioned, we work with a number of partners on this work, and Rodney was gracious to join us this evening. And so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your work and how your team is responsible for the things that have been going on with the Equity Fund. We'll start with Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Angela, and thank you, Lynette. Thank you, everyone, for coming out here tonight. Your presence here is really important to us, and we hope that we're able to share with you the importance of the work that we do. So as mentioned, I'm Sis Killen. I am the Superintendent of Transportation for Department of Cook County Transportation and Highways. And what I want to start with is when we think about transportation, we all know, what it is. What is a transportation? It's a road, it's a bridge, it's a sidewalk, it's a bike path. But what we want to think about is, what does it do and who does it serve? What is the value of investing in transportation? It's key, it's crucial, because we know that it is the backbone to economic vitality in communities. With it, communities and residents thrive. Without it, there are struggles, there are challenges. We are here to support not only the residents, but the businesses that choose to make your communities home, to allow them to grow in place. And more importantly, we want to make sure that we're using transportation as a catalyst to help businesses come in, stay in, and bring jobs closer to home. So my work with the Equity Fund is really focused around transportation equity and transit equity. And what I mean by that is that we are focused through policy initiatives under Madam President to make sure that we are investing equitably in our communities, but more importantly, we need to bring holistic transportation solutions. Not just one piece of the pie where you can pat yourself on the back and say, okay, we did what we had to do. No, no, no. We need to break this down and say, if we are coming into communities, we need to work with residents, with the local officials, with stakeholders to understand what do community residents need, what do community businesses need, and make sure that we're thinking more holistically and thoughtfully about the transportation solutions that we're bringing in. And I say that word solution because we're here to address challenges and we're here to provide connection and mobility. The other side of the work that we do is in transit equity. In our region, we have a robust transit system. We have Metra, we have PACE, we have CTA, and it's only good if you can get to it. It's only good if you can afford to ride on it. So that is where our department has partnered up with the Equity Task Force to look at the policies, to look at the accessibility, and it's not just that physical accessibility, but the financial accessibility to, again, allow our residents to utilize transit, because what does transit do? It connects us to jobs. It provides us access and transportation to physicians' appointments, to recreations, to errands, to see friends and family. And we need to invest in it. It's critically important to our region, not just for us, but it's a major attractor for businesses. So we can utilize transit to not just help you get to your job, but what we want to do through our equity work is really highlight the importance of the transit system to help bring jobs into the communities so that you don't have to go an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours each way to go to work. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rodney Harrington, and I am the Executive Director of the River Oaks Community Education and Development Corporation. We are a 501c3 organization based in South Holland. We are a community development corporation, so I serve as sort of you. We are the voice that then goes to Cook County and lets Cook County know what is needed for our communities. So we've been in existence since 2010, and through that time we have been providing community services vis-a-vis before, after, and summer enrichment programming for those little ones right there. But since the pandemic hit, we were forced to expand our responsibilities, if you were, to our community. We serve as a what is known as a community navigator. The community navigators were created through the Department of Economic Opportunity, DCEO, Commerce and Economic Opportunity, to provide small businesses with technical assistance and support and bringing resources to small businesses within South Suburban Cook County. So we take that role seriously, and we have attempted to, again, get the word out about these services. Now, how does that play into our role here with Cook County? We also serve on the digital equity team, if you will, that comes together and comes up and listens to your voices and then relays that information to the county. So we hold or have held community conversations to understand what it is needed around this space known as digital equity. What is digital equity? It is infrastructure, it's equipment, it's access, it's affordability. All of those things that we think about every day but don't understand, we try to bring it to the county so that they understand what it is that is needed, and then ultimately through the Equity Fund, we'll bring those resources to the South Suburban and all of Cook County. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel tonight, and looking forward to the engagement.
Can I have a show of hands really quickly? How many folks, either for them personally or know someone who doesn't have a car and spends an enormous amount of time trying to catch multiple buses or trains to get to where they need to go? Okay. All right. How many of you know someone in your household or someone that you know that doesn't have access to the internet? right? And how many of you have often looked around and felt unsafe, either where you were or where you were going? How many of you have felt or know somebody that it doesn't feel safe in their communities? Okay. So for us, those are all rights that we should all enjoy, regardless of where you live in the city. And I think that that's an easy way to think about a lot of the work that's happening through the Equity Fund. We're trying to create that right for everyone, whether it's digital, whether it's in transportation, whether it's safety, whether it's, small businesses and making sure that they have the resources that they need to thrive in their communities and across the board. So just wanted to kind of to highlight that a little bit.
That was great. Thank you, Lynetta. And so Lynetta is actually wearing two hats tonight. In addition to being the Chief of Staff, she's going to be our subject matter expert on violence prevention. And so we're going to go ahead and start with our questions. And I want to let you know that if you have questions that you would like to ask the panelists, there are some note cards over here right in front of Jeremy that you can take the pen and write those down, and we can just get those over to the panel. And so I'm going to start with you, Lynetta. The video touched on it a bit when it talked about the difference between equality and equity. And so can you go a little deeper into those two distinctions and how it relates to what the work is being done with the county?
Yeah. So there's, I think, I see it all the time. There's an image where it has the equality and the equity, right? I see a lot of head nods, right? Equality is everybody is standing at the fence and they're all at the same place, right? Regardless of where they live, what their circumstances might be, what they have access to, what their families have access to or not. And the equity is perhaps that young person needs a step in order for them to see at that starting line. That's the difference, right? It's saying that we're all different, that there has been historic and racist policies that have been intentionally put into place by government, even if it wasn't us, right? And by other systems, and that we all then have a responsibility to make sure that we are addressing the needs. It's not all, it's what do you need to thrive? What does your community need to thrive? And by intentionally focusing on that equity, you do then get to all having safer communities that are invested in across the board. So it's not a subtraction, but it's an acknowledgement that there have been policies and a lack of money and a lack of other systems doing what they need to do that has contributed to some of the inequalities or the disparities that we see. So that's, to me, the difference between equality and this notion that everybody is given the same resources, therefore you can, kind of thrive, versus equity, meaning I am more equitable and you are more equitable if I meet you where you are and help you with where you are to get to the next step.
Okay, and Rodney, tell us a little bit more about the River Oaks Development Corporation and your participation on the Suburban Cook County Digital Equity Guiding Team.
So I got a call one day. I got a call from the president's office and said, you will serve on this guiding team. And I said, okay. Needless to say, I was surprised, but welcomed the opportunity. It was, once we got to that, what we wanted to do is really understand what it was that, again, the constituents of Cook County, and more specifically in our particular area, which encompasses Dalton, Calumet City, South Holland, Lansing, Harvey, Phoenix, all those particular communities, which, by the way, are some of the communities that are affected by the lack of digital access. And they believe the number is 40% of the homes in that particular area lack affordable digital access, broadband access. So we reached out to the community and brought in folks that had a voice, wanted to share their experiences. We were able to bring in Cook County representatives. We also brought in corporate representatives. Comcast came to the event. We also brought in it was an organization that actually lays the digital network, underground networks for the South suburban area in Cook County. They were at the table. They got to hear real information from each of the participants in that. Some of them didn't like it. They didn't like it because they felt it exposed them. But those are honest conversations. The community needs to have those conversations. So that's what we did in order to at least let the county know that this is the thoughts, these are the wishes of the local constituents of our community. So ROC-ED is our short name, River Oaks Community Education and Development Corporation. We hope to be an advocate for, again, our community to ensure that Cook County brings those resources to our particular area.
You said 40%, like, can you guys imagine? 40% of folks don't have access, not the broadband or the internet. And the last time I checked, pretty much everything is digital, right? And a lot of times, even if you have a smartphone, if you're applying for a job, you still need to get on an actual laptop. Homework for your young people is still now all digital. They have to be on a laptop in order to access that. Making doctor's appointments, engaging with county government, all of that requires you to be using some kind of internet access, and there's not that many free resources or low-cost programs anymore like there used to be. So definitely we're trying to change that dynamic over time.
Okay, and I'll go to Sis. So the average person probably doesn't think about the infrastructure and how it plays a role in their everyday life until something breaks down. Tell us about how the work that you do with transportation and highways will resonate with the average person.
Well, Angela, you really hit that square on the head. I'll say when I went into this field, it was because I wanted to be someone who worked behind the curtain, so to speak. You know, you didn't realize what transportation, wasn't doing for you until something catastrophic happened. And I knew that I wanted to go in and work so that you didn't have to think about transportation. It was something that every community had. It's something that every resident had access to, and that we had infrastructure that met the demands and needs of today. That was my goal 25 years ago. And here we are 25 years later, and we are dealing with degraded infrastructure, right? Potholes, no sidewalk, having to walk through the cattle paths where there's no grass, it's muddy. Having a family member or friend who is in a wheelchair, but there's no way for them to get around, needing to travel in the streets. Where do you have school walking plans? Where can the children safely get to school? How can you safely access parks? So this is transportation in a nutshell. We think about cars, and that's how transportation was always defined before. It was about vehicles. And my former charge, at the department, we were the highway department. That's all we did, roads and bridges. Little red lines on a map that we just had to keep up to make sure we resurfaced roads when we needed to, and we kept things up to meet the grade, for our folks over at the state of Illinois. But we know transportation is much more than that, and as we think about how it relates to you as a person, all of those things that I mentioned, these are all things that we want in our community. These are all assets that we want to have access to. Also recognize that we call it state of good repair of those assets is not the same in every community. You may drive through some communities and you say, my goodness, aren't these roads paved to gold? Not a single pothole here. You're not stuck at traffic lights. You're not stuck at the gates that come down on the railroad system. And there are some communities that might take you extra 45 minutes to get to where you need to go, because every time you go, you hit a red light. Every road you go down, there's gates that are coming down, and you now need to drive around again, if you have the luxury of having your car. Drive around 3 miles to get around that. And again, as we think about transportation, you think about, you know, buses. Cook County, we don't operate bus systems, but the buses go on our roads. More importantly, buses go on roads that are owned, and I say things that we are required to invest in by others. When we think about transportation, no one here should have to think about who owns that road. Who do I need to call to report a problem? How can we ensure that we know there are people working to make sure that transportation is doing what we need to do in communities without having to call 4 different agencies to find out who the heck it is you need to talk to because you hit a pothole, you fell, you got hurt walking on a sidewalk. These are problems that face residents every day in their communities. My goal, my charge, and the reason why I got into this 25 years ago is that I wanted to make a difference. I want to make sure people can get to their destinations safely. I want to make sure that people can get to their destinations efficiently. And we don't want to think about how long it's going to take catching 4 buses here to only miss that final one and knowing, is this the last day that you can't punch in on time and have to go sit in your supervisor's office? So we need to think about what it does, what it is, who it serves, and what is the cost of not making investments in it that's really helping or, quite honestly, hurting people and hurting communities.
That was awesome. Thank you for that answer. And I'm going to move to Lynetta. I said you're wearing 2 hats tonight to talk about one of the lead agencies that is doing violence prevention for Cook County is the Justice Advisory Council. And prior to being Chief of Staff, Lynetta was actually the Executive Director of the JAC. So tell us a little bit about the Justice Advisory Council, and then I'll ask a twofold question. Communities of color have historically seen very adversarial relationships with law enforcement and often find themselves in a justice system that treats them unfairly. Explain to us how your work at the JAC or with the JAC is addressing these issues.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Angela, for that. So our Justice Advisory Council is our arm, our criminal legal system arm. So they work every day as subject matter experts, working with many in the community around how do we improve community safety, and how do we safely reduce the Cook County Jail, which the sheriff is responsible for, but the president has some oversight and some responsibility from a budgeting standpoint. So it really is about looking at the criminal legal system and reimagining how we use the system. If you look at the county's budget, about roughly, I would say 50% is criminal justice that we're expending, and that's for all of the systems that impact individuals who are coming before a judge. So that's our chief judge's office, that's our state's attorney, that's our public defender, that's our clerk's office, those in the courtroom, kind of typing up the notes and making sure all of the orders get entered, and that's also our sheriff office. If 50% of our funds are going to the criminal legal system, and the other 50%, let's just say, is going to our healthcare system, we better pay attention to that, right? And so the county and the Justice Advisory Council is not, they're kind of responsible on the back end for the jails, but we have to work with our partners at the City of Chicago and our Chicago Police Department in order to make sure that those systems are talking to each other. We like to say we see the back end of it. We want to make sure that there is constitutional policing and that people feel safe in their communities, and we think that we can do both of them, right? And so the Justice Advisory Council really looks at policy, right? With the new Pretrial Fairness Act, how many of you are aware of some of the changes that have happened with I-bonds and people now being able to be released on I-bond instead of being stuck in jail for months, right? So we worked very closely with many of the actors and the legislators in Springfield to pass that. That was some of the work of the Justice Advisory Council. So policy, legislative work, but more importantly, we invest money into communities. So the Justice Advisory Council, a lot of money through the federal dollars, through the American Rescue Plan Act, and some of the dollars that the county has. We've invested about $110 million just since 2022, and community-based organizations that are actually working with the highest risk population, working with the young people to make sure that they have safe spaces after school, so that they are not deterred and doing things that they shouldn't do. And so the Justice Advisory Council really is looking at how do we invest in community-based organizations that are on the front lines doing the work? How do we make sure that our policies at the county level are equitable, and that ultimately we want more people to be in their homes waiting for their day in court rather than being locked up in the jail. And oh, by the way, I think you guys can guess that the disparities in our Cook County Jail is the same if you think about all of the disparities and the inequities that impact Black people particularly. So most of the population in the jail is African American males, right? They're your 19 to 24-year-old sons, brothers, cousins, the guy that lives next door. That is where the jail system is, and we want to change that. And so in order to change it, we have to acknowledge that it is a thing, and then we are working to reform and reimagine what a system looks like without policing, right? And responding to whether it's a 911 calls, whether it's behavioral health incidents, without police, but with really kind of the first responders, the social workers, the behavioral health specialists that can really work with that family, de-escalate, and provide access to the services that they need so that they're not spiraling in the system. So that's a little bit of the work that the Justice Advisory Council works on day to day with many partners in the Southland. And we have a specific and an intentional focus on the Southland. And there. So there is a lot of good programs, the Justice Advisory Councils and things of that nature that are set up in South Suburban Cook, and we're working with many of those partners as well.
And Angela, I'd like to add on to what Lynetta just said. As an organization that serves the community, we were a recipient of those resources, and I'll tell it how it ties into digital equity. When our children were out of school during COVID, and we were thinking of ways to assist with their educational process, we were able to, through the funding of JAC, able to open our doors to virtual learning. So we created space for our youth in our community to come. Obviously, we wanted to make sure that they were safe and separated and ensure that there was safety from any sort of contagion. We were able to execute that and provide out-of-school time learning for those children who could not go to school anymore. They had to come, they had to learn, parents had to go to work, so we created a space, and thankfully JAC offered that resource to us so that we could execute our out-of-school time learning. So, thank you.
Great example, thank you. And so I'll stick with you, Lynetta, because of course we know that a lot of our communities are impacted by violence and that need for safety. And so how do you incorporate community voice, and how does the JAC incorporate community voice in the work that it does?
Well, first and foremost, you all are part of the community voice that we want to hear, right? And so we are trying to do a better job of going back out and staying connected to community. And so that is an area that we do need to improve on. There are often times where government makes decisions without thinking about the impact on the day-to-day lives of our residents, and we've been working over the last couple years to change that dynamic. Specifically for Community Voice and the Justice Advisory Council, we used to get questions all the time at different events. right? And this is beyond somebody's legal case. It's about kind of who are all of the system's actor? How do I know what the chief judge does, and what does the state's attorney do, and what does the public defender do? And there was always a lack of data, right? Because nobody likes to share information, even if it's good. I'm like, why don't you want to share the good news, right? We're not all bad. And so it was about understanding who the actors are, understanding what the data, how many people are in the jail on any given day, what are their racial and ethnic background. That's information that everybody should have access to, but we don't necessarily. And then there were always questions about, how does the system work, and will my family member or a friend that just got locked up, are they going to get an I-bond to get out? And so some years ago at the Justice Advisory Council, we started doing just impromptu community tables, and we would go to their community tables because we don't want to just recreate a table. If there was a community meeting, we would show up and we would talk about the system. Sometimes we would get beat up, and we try to explain we're not the sheriff's office, but people hear county and they're like, oh, it's you, right? So we had to carry that message to say, this is not the way that the criminal legal system should be. We are dedicated to changing that, and we are working with all of the other actors to make it happen. And so we have formalized that process through the Justice Advisory Council, and Avik Das, who is the executive director, and his team actually applied for a grant from the MacArthur Foundation. It's a foundation with a whole lot of money that invests a lot in the Chicagoland area. And they asked for what we're calling community justice liaisons. And the idea is we want folks that have been impacted by the criminal legal system, that have been locked up and changed their lives, to be standing with us to help answer and address some of these questions. And it's not just good enough to go out to a community event. We want them to actually be sitting side by side with us at these meetings and hearing what that data is and helping to make decisions. And so the community justice liaisons is a model that the Justice Advisory Council has been using for the last couple years. And it's training them to better understand what the criminal legal system is, but also learning from them so that they can be ambassadors and take back the information to their block club or their church or their child's school who may be having some safety concerns. And so what we're trying to do is expand that model so that regardless of whether it's a criminal justice issue, if it's economic development, how do you access all of the services? Who do you go to when you are thinking about, to Sis's point, potholes? It's not us, but still, right? Like where's that accessibility and entry point? And that's the community voice that we're trying to make sure that is at the table on a continuous way, and not just whenever we want to get you all's opinion on something. And so incorporating community voice, making sure that it's authentic, making sure that we're also paying those impacted community members to be at our table. So we are working on what we're calling a community compensation policy. If you are, I have a law degree, that makes me a lawyer, right? But if you've had lived experience, you're just as much of a professional. If you're in the community and you know where the hot spots are and what time people come out and what needs to happen in your community, if we're inviting you to the table to share that, we're also going to compensate you for coming to the table and doing that. So that's a few ways that we're trying to incorporate community voice, both through making sure that there's tables that are set and that we're going to their tables to ask and answer questions for them, and then compensating community members who are coming and providing that, whether it's a focus group or advisory council. But we want to make sure that we have that, not just for us, but also for all of our staff who may not get out and be able to join one of these events. But we want to make sure that when they're thinking on a day-to-day basis about their work and how it impacts residents, that they hear that community voice and they understand what are the community needs and how and what is my responsibility and my day-to-day job, how does that fit into providing those resources to those communities?
I have a comment and a question for Sis.
All right. Oh, Sis, good. Thank you all for giving her the first question.
Bike paths and bikes are highly needed. Our mobile homes have a long way to bus routes, and walking Glenwood Dyer Road is unsafe. There are no sidewalks or bike paths. So the question is, though, for that was a comment. Now this is a question. There is Lynwood is currently conducting a transportation feasibility study. There is Pace Bus 358 that runs down Torrance Avenue through the village. How do we get Pace to the table to address adding additional steps to the west and east? Additional stops to the west and east of Lynwood via Dyer Road.
Okay. We've got a couple parts of that question, so I'm going to address them all individually. The first one was just the statement, regarding bike paths on Glenwood Dyer Road. One of the things the county has done, we released a bike plan back in May of this year, and it's a policy document. It's establishing that there is a need for county investment in what is deemed local infrastructure. It's not local infrastructure when it comes down to regional mobility. So we have created a plan that can outline ways that we can partner with communities, we can partner with funding agencies, because you can't construct the asset unless there's money to build it. You can't have the asset to build unless there's someone taking leadership to identify what is our goal here, what is the outcome that we wish to have. Who is the agency that could sit down with neighboring communities and say, what is the higher level goal here, not just the hyper-local goal at this one specific location? That is what Cook County government does. That is what we set out to do when we created this bike plan. So we are very early in implementation stages, like I said, just May of this year, but it is to address the challenges. There's no bike infrastructure. There are no sidewalks. I need to walk in the street with cars sometimes going 35 or 40 miles an hour. Maybe there's a bus that wants to come down along with some trucks. These are real challenges, so we are taking a look at that. The second question here was regarding Pace 358. Something else that we've done is we've created a transit plan. This is a strategic framework, and we just took this to our Board of Commissioners. Had heard from me last week where they had received and filed this report, but it outlines how and why and where we need to partner with our transit agencies, because Cook County, we do not own and operate buses, we do not own and operate trains. But as we heard Lynetta speak, making sure voices are heard. Cook County government's voice, sitting down with the transit agencies, sitting down when we have financial resources to bring into projects in the communities, whether that is station rehabilitation, rebuilding a metro station. Do you have shelter from the elements? Looking at bus stops that are typically municipally maintained. Well, if the municipality doesn't have the funds to do it, do we just say, oh, can't have it, time to move on? If a community needs additional service, that is a conversation that our transit plan outlines why Cook County needs to be participatory in these conversations, how we can sit and bring the needs and the voices of our local community members to the agencies that we partner strategically with. So it is how we need to come together. And you said, Sis, that's wonderful. You just told me about 2 plans. What does that do? We do have implementation efforts that are earmarked for how we're going to move it forward. We have created annual grant programs. So the comprehensive plan that Lynwood is working on, we actually had funded through our Invest in Cook grant program. It was they were award recipient. Sorry, Mayor Curry left, but that was last year. So I know, Trustee, that we were able to bring that forward with that agreement executed by the board. how can we work to identify what is the need, and then collectively, we can work towards the implementation path for the solution. So in Cook County, there are 205 transportation agencies. 205.
205?
We are one.
I didn't even know that.
We are-
205? Can you imagine 205 different agencies all in the same space?
All in Cook
Who do
County.
you call, right?
5% of the roads are under Cook County jurisdiction, which means we are the owner. We have the final authority to say. When we think about mobility through communities, those numbers, that's not good enough. You need to have a leader. You need to have a champion. So hearing the concerns that are brought here today, again, local voice, what are we doing about bike infrastructure? What can we do to partner with our local transit service providers to elevate the need? How can we think about the future state of transit operations in our communities? That is the role that we wish to play, not just through our political engagement and advocacy, but through our financial contributions to make it happen.
So who do you know at Pace that they can call? No, just
Yeah. I'll just try to talk
Okay,
loud.
yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. So one of the things I just wanted to piggyback on what Sis mentioned about the bike path, the bike plan for biking. So this is where we need your voices to say, yes, it's a good idea, and the infrastructure is there, because I'm being a bit facetious, but a couple years ago, they didn't think people in the south suburbs ride bikes, okay?
Right.
So we need to say, here's some letters. I'm all about being an advocate, right? Here's some letters to say, not only do we appreciate this bike path that's now a plan that's coming up, but here's some other things about it, or I think it's great, or I think it could be better, but appreciate the fact that we even have such a thing at this point, because we didn't have it a few years ago. And it's a financial investment in making sure that the connectivity is there throughout suburban Cook County for bike paths, not just here in Lynwood, but across all the different municipalities. That's one thing. And the other thing about the bus on 358, so a while ago I did say, you know, we need to have more connectivity, or how long does it take for people in the south suburbs on a bike, on a bus path to get from point A to point B. So I took a bus from here to go to Blue Island, and it took me 3 buses to get there. And I was standing right off of there, off of Glenwood Dyer Road, in a little dirt pile, because there's no shelter, there's no nothing. So that was really eye-opening to some people. They're like, how is anyone who's in a wheelchair or has a broken leg, you know, how are you supposed to get over here? A stroller with your baby. So these are the things that we need from input from the community too. If you take the bus, and it was raining that day that we went too. It started raining and everything was all muddy. Of course, that's not cute, right? So, so these are the things that we need to also hear. But when we are implementing a transportation plan, which we just had the other day, you know, more input. So we would love to hear more input from you. And I know Sis is very much on top of all of this.
I'm going to put a slide on the television so you can have everyone's contact information. And I'm going to ask Mr. Harrington, what programs do you have to equip homes with devices, i.e. tablets, smartphones, for low to mid-level income homes?
Guess what? We are doing next week, we have an event where we're asking the community, if you have any gently used computers, technology, bring them to us so that we can then in turn provide our community with those devices. That is part of the civic engagement that we are hoping to coordinate in South Suburban Cook County. So that is just one example of what Rock Ed is attempting to do for our citizens. So that's a very important thing for us to, and there are other ideas that we will come up, but that is one immediate thing that we are going to do.
Okay, thank you for that. And Lynetta, back to violence prevention. What programs can be incorporated for high school age children that would teach them to say no when approached by older individuals who are encouraging them to steal? They are being preyed on because they are told they are too young to go to jail.
Unfortunately, that happens way more than we would like. So the Justice Advisory Council, as I mentioned earlier, has grant investments, and they are corporate dollars that they put in violence prevention and in reentry services. The reentry services are really for men and women who are returning from our jails and prisons to make sure that they're connected to what they need. Simple things like their ID, having an attorney that is available for them when they do get home, access to behavioral health and connecting them to primary health, and quite frankly, the housing is a huge issue there. And so there are funds being invested into that population, because if you left and your community didn't have anything and you come back and your community doesn't still have anything, and now you have a criminal record, you're not going to be able to get gainful employment and do what you're supposed to do, which means then that your recidivism rate or your chances of going back into the system is high. So there's that money. In terms of the youth, it's all wrapped into our violence prevention money. And so a lot of the programs that the Justice Advisory Fund are around youth development and addressing the root causes. And so that is certainly an area that many of the dollars go to. After school programs, making sure that we are using and funding organizations that use restorative justice, right? Rehabilitating and not punitive of how we interact with our young people. And quite frankly, all of the other things that we know we want: affordable housing, the bike path, right? Parks where our young people can actually hang out after school. I know that you all, many of you probably saw the last 2 summers in downtown, all of them coming down. Is it mob action, or is it that they don't feel safe in their communities and they're just trying to hang out? Think about, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but we hung out. We were okay with hanging out in the mall area after school, maybe ditching a time or two. Don't say that out loud. Okay. Right? But that was when you could do those kind of things, and now our young people can't. And so the Justice Advisory Council, they are, I don't think that there's a new, we just closed one of the grant applications, but we will provide that website where all of the grant opportunities are for youth development, after school programs, restorative justice programs, and even employment. So we do have, through our Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, we provide them with resources along with the City of Chicago to do year-round employment opportunities in high-growth areas, right? So that's the transportation and logistics, that's healthcare, which is another really big high-sector field. There is technology, and so directing those young people into that path so that they're not getting caught up and attracted. At the end of the day, it's about having money, right, and having access to the things that they need. And many of them are probably supporting and contributing to the household, because we know that like many of our households are run by single mothers who have to work, and so that young person may be more attracted to the underground economy instead of the legal one, just because they don't have any options. It's not to excuse them. There is a way to hold young people accountable, but you have to do that thinking in mind about how old they are and what resources have we provided them. And then there's always going to be some outliers, and there are probably some of our folks that we know. I know 1 or 2 in my family that I'm like, what is wrong with you? A lot of love and discipline and all of those things. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But that is certainly an area that the Justice Advisory Council funds.
And can I make?
Yep.
So I was just going to add too that she mentioned the Restorative Justice Center. So I'm proud to say there's one coming to the south suburbs. The first one is coming. So we've been advocating for that for a while now. It's going to be on this side of town. So once it gets announced, community partners and community will be the ones to be part of those restorative justice courts. So we'll look for all of you to participate. They have young people participation. They have, you know, people from the community who have the expertise or who just want to learn about a restorative justice court and what it looks like. And this is another investment from the county to help counteract some of these non-violent offenders.
Okay, so I have a few questions that are a bit broader in scope, but we have a commissioner and the chief of staff here, so we can get these questions
pass
answered.
it to the commissioner first.
So 2 weeks ago, the south suburbs got hit hard with flooding. Are there any funds available to help with losses?
The first and foremost for everybody that was impacted, not just in the Southland, but I know Cicero, Berwyn, Austin, all of them got hit as well. We are working very closely with the federal government, so there are funds that are coming down. So we have a department, Emergency Management and Regional Security. It was used to be called Homeland Security. We changed their name a few years ago because of that equity lens, right? We know that we have a troubled relationship with law enforcement and first responders, particularly military or otherwise, and so we really thought about if we want community members to trust us, do they trust us if we're Homeland Security? Do they trust us when we're coming saying, we're really here to help in your worst moment possible? We want to make sure that we show up and that our team, led by our executive director, Ted Berger, is there working with the municipality, working with the residents to put them immediately in a better place. So for the flooding, I do think that once that came, he was immediately, making the phone calls to all of the village mayors and the trustees, and they were calling the county as well, saying that we need help in the immediate to get some of the water out of people's homes. And then there is a very lengthy process for declaring a disaster proclamation, which the county did, and then the state of Illinois under Governor Pritzker followed as well. And that started the chain of really having the federal government come out. They looked at the data, how many homes were flooded, and they determined that it was something that needed additional resources. So if I'm not mistaken, there's been over $50 million, and that was even like a week or two ago, of requests that came from all of those homes. And so with the federal agencies, our emergency management office, the state of Illinois, and the city of Chicago, they're all working double time to make sure that those resources are provided directly to in those individual homes. And they're navigators to help individual residents complete all of those forms. And I think we got, it hasn't been used ever. I'm going to botch it, but it's basically like the presidential proclamation of disaster. And because all of the stakeholders did such a good job of demonstrating the need, and because so many of our residents said, hey, I need help, not only to get all of the water out of my basement, but to replace everything that I lost. And of course, all of the personal items can never be replaced, but we want to make sure that above and beyond the insurance, and many of them didn't have homeowners insurance, or at least adequate level to cover that it's done. So because of all of that work and because of the coordination across all of those systems, President Biden actually did a presidential proclamation which opens up even more money that's going to be coming in. So I'll turn it over to Commissioner
Well, and then
Miller.
just the other addition is that there's local offices. There's one in Calumet City where the technical advisors are. If you are not connected to me on social media, just go to my page. We have the list of how you can fill out the application on Cook County Commissioner Donna Miller page, or you can always email my office or call my office. So yes, I have had my basement here in Lynwood flood 3 different times. And we've had to replace every single thing in our basement twice. So I have experienced it, not the last time though. We kept going downstairs to make sure everything was okay, so everything was okay. But we do feel for those homeowners who felt that burden, and with this national, I mean, this is on federal level, the disaster proclamation. So if you know anybody impacted, please tell them to fill out this paperwork. And if they have questions, the technical advisors can help them.
Could I add on to that? Yeah. Just as we're thinking about flooding, you know, technical term for us would be like the storm water management. So Cook County invested $20 million of its American Rescue Plan money. This is a program that my department is responsible for, and we partnered up with our emergency management and regional security. We were working with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Chicago. We were working with our Bureau of Economic Development and Department of Planning and Development, who has regular touch points, as do we, with the communities. So we were able to, we're not going to be able to just fix all of the infrastructure that creates flooding. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even a couple of those B's, the billions of dollars. But what Cook County did with its ARPA funds is how could we partner with those agencies, and as it was mentioned here, file your claim, file your report. We are taking the data that is coming through emergency management and regional security. We are taking that data that's coming through areas of Cook County that are in the city of Chicago and working with the districts who touch points with the municipalities. Where can we initiate studies? We need to start with a concept. We can't just go build a solution until we understand the issue, the magnitude of the issue, the scope, the scale, and more importantly, how can we lay out a funding strategy? So some of the county's resources, we are getting ready this year. We started executing some agreements. We have some projects that will be coming out in the 6th district. How could we, again, identify what is the issue, what is the solution, and how can we leverage Cook County funds, other local funds, other state funds for the federal resources that are available. This is a marathon, not a sprint, but the way that we are able to allocate our funds, you know, every $20 million at a time, every $500,000 at a time, every $25,000 at a time, that is how we work toward a larger solution, and that is what Cook County has committed to with its dedication of ARPA funds.
Okay. Next question is, at O'Hare, how will the Equity Fund assist the homeless on the trains and the immigrants who are also in dire need for assistance?
So I don't know that the Equity Fund can immediately address some of the challenges that are being felt by the migrants and the new arrivals, although the county has been working very closely with the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois to put in place a plan, and part of that is the health screenings that all the new arrivals, as they're coming into the city, our Cook County Health and Hospital System are providing those medical screenings when they get off the buses or the airplanes. In terms of the unhoused population or the homeless population, it's certainly something that is underlying some of the work for the Equity Fund, not just for the new arrivals, but quite frankly for the residents that are here. And we know, particularly in the South Suburban area, that the shelter system has never been a one that is dignified and that really takes care of everyone that needs it. We learned that the hard way as well, and it was really amplified during COVID, where we were able to really work with many of the municipalities to repurpose those the hotels that were already vacant. And so we are providing, and we just signed, the commissioners just approved some funds for an Evanston and an Oak Park shelter, and the third was is in the South Suburban area to make sure that that's there. And so that is part of the shelter system, and not just in the immediate immediate you need a place, but what's that transition, right? To move away from the shelter to your own one-bedroom or your own apartment. What does that path look like so that you are housed? Because if you don't have a roof over your head, everything else just becomes so much more difficult. And so that would be my answer to that. Underlying the equity fund is really one of the recommendations to shore up the shelter supports in the South suburban area in particular, because that's the need from an equity lens, right? And also making sure that we are working across partners to increase the affordable housing, which again is, most of our Black people and brown people are disproportionately impacted on our rent burden, meaning that you're working your hardest and most of your check goes to just paying your rent or keeping your house intact. And so those are some of the underlying recommendations that will take time, but that we're focusing on from an equity lens and putting some of our American Rescue dollars to that. So in the immediate, no, there are no good answers, but certainly over time, that those are some of the fundamental elements of the equity fund that we're trying to do over time.
And so if anyone doesn't have anything to do tonight or tomorrow, you could go review our board meeting from last week. So
there was a lively debate.
Very lively 2.5-hour long discussion about the homeless need in the south suburbs, where, as Lynetta mentioned, from an equity lens, the need is greatest in the south suburbs, and especially right here where we are. So Respond Now, if any of you are familiar with that, is right here in Chicago Heights. And they have been working on this for quite some time. So the money has been allocated. It has been set aside to put a homeless shelter of some sort in place in this area. The question is where. So we need help from the community and from our mayors to say, we'll welcome that in certain communities, because the need is really great. If you have not ever participated or gone over to Respond Now, I would encourage you, because they have a wealth of information as to what they know about where our unhoused residents are and where they are on a consistent basis, and how we can go out and help them. So the need is there, and it has been identified. The funds are there. We're just looking for a location.
Okay, we have two final questions, and we are going to begin to wrap up. One is going to be what I would describe as an equal opportunity question. How do we work around people being disqualified for job opportunities due to them taking advantage of the legalization of marijuana?
Say that again.
How do we work around people being disqualified for job opportunities, and I'm going to interject with the county, due to them taking advantage of the legalization of marijuana?
So the county, particularly offices under the president, understands that and worked very hard to help legalize marijuana. Of course, for a really long time, a large part of the jail population is there for drugs, right? And there is a different treatment between how the system responds to Black people who are caught up in the drug trade versus some of our peers who may be doing more socially acceptable drugs. And so we definitely, from a legislative and a policy standpoint, we were there with the legislators, our commissioners, really fighting to legalize marijuana. And we have also updated our policies in terms of employment. So we are a second chance. We stopped drug testing for marijuana But there are, of course, still tests for harder drugs that are considered or still illegal. But we changed our policy a few years ago, even before the cannabis was legalized. And so if you are applying for a county job, as long as you don't have, or you're applying for what they consider a safety-sensitive position, and so those are like CISIS teams. If you're driving a truck, salt truck, you can't be under the influence of anything, right? But if you're not in a safety-sensitive position, you are told up front that there are no drug tests, at least for marijuana, and that is not held against you, both in terms of your employment and if you have a criminal record, that as long as it's not a violent criminal record, that is not counted against you. So that should not be happening. I can't speak for the other offices, but I would hope that they are not still tagging people for having marijuana in their system if they're applying for a non-safety sensitive position. So that's the caveat. It has to be a non-safety sensitive position. And that usually is driving and, you know, equipment operations. For obvious reasons, we want you to be fully there.
Exactly. Okay, and so our final question, and this is for Lynetta, because this is going to be the wrap up and the call to action and the next steps of how we want to engage the community going forward. This is my first time hearing about the Equity Fund. What type of advertising or communication is out there that's showing what it does and who it's serving, and how does it benefit our community?
Yeah. Good question. And I think I started with saying that government isn't that great when it comes to engaging, right? And we're trying to do better, right? So part of it is coming to you all and acknowledging where we are and saying we want you all to help us help you, right? So providing more opportunities like this to hear directly from community, for us to bring information to you all. Right now, the Equity Fund really lives online, and you can access our website, and there were some books printed. This is how much I look at my copy. I did stapled it together. Now, there's plenty of other copies, but I just love this copy for whatever reasons. But certainly doing online, that community justice council that I had mentioned earlier, expanding that, and hearing directly from you all. We want to know who are the anchoring community-based organizations. Respond Now is one of them. South Suburban PADS is another one. The South Suburban Justice Advisory Council is another one. We need to be more connected to them so that you all get access to that information. I don't believe in setting tables just for the sake of saying that this is a county table. We want to go to the community meetings that are already there, work with those organizations that know you all best, and that can really be carrying the water, like Rodney and his organization. So this is our commitment to say we do need to do better. We do need to give you all the good information as well as the bad information, and we're looking for you all to help. So if you have suggestions, if you have organizations, where do you get your information from in terms of where county government is and what's happening? We then want to tap into those networks to give them the information to pass on. So if you have suggestions about community-based organizations or where you stop and get information, I'm not just talking about the gossip, but real information. I want to know where y'all get the gossip too, but real information, because those are the spaces and the places and the people that we need to be connected to. So that's on us. We really, really appreciate the mayor and Commissioner Miller for having us here, and we'll be doing more of these throughout the year.
Well, I'll just say, if you're not connected on social media, you can join me on social media. I post all of this, so all of the equity information has been shared. If you're not on social media, I also have a monthly newsletter where we share all of that information. If you signed up, we'll add you to the newsletter. And you can always come to a county board meeting and hear all of this live and in person in real time. But thank you all for being here. I appreciate the engagement, and thank you to our partners, Lynetta, for putting all of this together. Sis has been here many times talking with the mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Trustee, for being so engaged in what happens in our community and being great partners.
Yeah.
And Rodney, too.
Yep, and Rodney. And we'll make sure that we have, and if you have email addresses, there is a county newsletter as well that we can connect you all to. And then, of course, working very closely with Commissioner Miller and her team to make sure that you all get the video and that you get, copies of the Equity Fund. We can send that electronically, understanding that there is still an issue with digital equity and not everybody has access to it. So that is something that Rodney and many members of our team is working on. But we want to make sure that this is not the first and only time that we come out. And so if you leave your contact information, we'll make sure that you're added on that and share that information across all of our offices. And that's an example of government working together and you all not having to go to the president's office and then Commissioner Miller's office and then the mayor's office. We're here to serve you and to hear from you. So we really appreciate you all coming out tonight.